I need some traction. You need some traction.
Welcome everybody to another Traction webinar series presented by Boast.ai, Launch Academy, in partnerships with Growth Blazers, the Founders Institute, Lazarides Institute, and BCF Ventures. Excited to bring another webinar to you today. We got a great topic today for startups, really talking about grants. So the SBIR topic. We'll also cover a little bit of the R&D tax incentives. The title today is "The Juice Worth the Squeeze." I absolutely love that because there is a bit of pain that goes involved with it, but man, free money goes a long way to grow your early stage companies. So super excited about that. Today joining us, we've got Rupak Doshi. He is the founder and CEO of OmniSync, the creators of TurboSBIR, which functions like TurboTax for your SBIRs, which is amazing because anything you can do to automate some of this is really going to help you out. Rupak has a Ph.D. from Cambridge, and he has academic experience with the Scripps Research Institute and the UC of San Diego. You also have industry experience with InhibRx, which IPO'd in 2020. That's fantastic. Love to hear a little bit about that today. Alongside, some startup experience, 3-time founder. Man, a great resume. Super excited to have you here today. Thanks very much. And how's everything going for you today?
So far, so good. Thanks so much, Russ. No, it's definitely been a pretty awesome journey. And everyone who asks me like what I'm doing right now, and then they cannot wrap their heads around what I've done in the past and how it led me to what I'm doing now. It just makes no sense at all. But when I then explain it to them, that's kind of when it starts to make a little bit of sense for people.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. How did you get here? Like what led you to this point? Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, so born and raised in India, went to undergrad in India, did biotech for my undergrad, right? After that, had this entrepreneurial idea, so started a company with a cousin of mine, back in my home city in India, which is Calcutta. And in 1 year, we built the product, we showed that it works and everything. And then I got an offer letter with a scholarship in Manchester in England to actually pursue masters. And I was like, at this point, that probably is the right approach for me. Although this company is good, I can probably hand it over and then go and get educated and then come back and run a much better company or something like that. That was the idea at that time.
Yeah.
And so I actually was able to sell IP for that company after 1 year. So that was like my first taste of success, right? Zero to exit in 1 year.
Amazing.
But it was a really small one. It was local. It was in India. It was great. It was for that time and place and amount of money I had in my wallet. That was good.
Yeah, for sure.
And then from there, I basically went to England, did a master's at Manchester in translational medicine. And then from there, I was thinking about starting, it was like, I've got my experience, I can still run a company. And at that point, I got a full paid scholarship for doing a PhD in Cambridge University in England. And this was paid not only for like the home fee or whatever tuition, it was also for like they were paying the entire foreign component and they were going to pay me a salary for every single year that I was like, okay, if they're going to do all this, they're going to invest like hundreds of thousands of dollars on me just to do a PhD from here. I probably should take it up. They probably see something valuable in me, so I should take it up, right? And so I did that for a few years in Cambridge, and that worked out pretty well in the sense that we published, really well in academic research. And I got a really good handle on what professors really do when they actually are doing research, like what is doing research, right? I got a really good handle of that. And then figured out that basic science research was definitely not what I wanted to do. And so from my PhD, I got an opportunity to do a full-time postdoctoral, training with a lab out of UC San Diego in the US that was actually working on stuff that was about to get spun out into companies. And so I was like, that sounds like a tremendous way for me to actually transition out from where I am. Otherwise, I might just get locked into the professorial track and become a professor, which I absolutely didn't want to do, right?
Yeah, and you hear that happens a lot too, right? So.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can get locked in, you can get sucked into it, man. When you're doing a PhD and everything, that's all you hear about everywhere, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to get into that. It sounds so cushy, right? It sounds like, yeah, you get a nice, cushy, well-paying job, professor, your tenure track, you get a job for life, great retirement. It sounds really cushy, right? But I wanted something different, right? So that was also my opportunity to come to the US, where obviously the industry, the market, all that's much bigger than the UK. And so for me, that was like, working across 3 different continents and having experience in that was a tremendous opportunity for me to get. And so I came out here, did that, did a postdoc, again, spun out, actually had one company that we actually, commercially were successful with the Levi Stadium and the military, which was really awesome. With my current co-founder, actually, he was interning with me back at the lab at UCSD at the time.
Nice.
So we actually did the company there. He went on and did something else, and then we came back together for this current OmniSync company. He's my co-founder now as well. Anyhow, so I did that. And then there was another company that we wanted to spin out from the lab, but that never got spun out, although the technology was very valid and relevant.
Right.
And that was the time when I started to figure out that, there's a lot of these technologies that never see the light of day, because the problem at that time was like, who's going to pay the bills right up front? Go out, try and raise money, see if anybody will bite. You're going and saying that I have this cool idea, pay me. And I was, honestly, if anyone could have done it, I could have done it really well, because I've shown that I could get money, get people to invest in me personally, right? Before, without having any kind of background. Now I had background to demonstrate, but then it was still pretty hard to do. And that's kind of where I started to learn a lot about these SBIR type of grants. And that's kind of like the stage that they're designed to fund. Right. And so what we did was I actually wanted to get real experience of doing one of these with an actual company. And so I went and joined InhibRx, which is a biotherapeutic startup in San Diego. It was a startup when I joined them, a medium-sized kind of a company. So I joined them at employee number like 15 or 20 or so. And then 3 years that I was there, it grew to over 100 people. It IPO'd in 2020. We had the SBIR experience happened along that time as well, which was great. So I got everything I needed from the company. And then I was like, when this opportunity came about to start OmniSync, I was like, all right, I've done everything that I could in my past background to have all the skill sets that I need to run this company now. And I knew that I wanted basically something that avoids that problem of good technologies that don't see the light of day. Like right. That's kind of I've made that my mission for my life. I believe every technology has a home, right? Be it however small or big that is. It could be a coffee shop down the road. It could be a multi-billion-dollar IPO, whatever it is. Every tech has a home. Every new idea has a home. Right, and that idea should get to that home in whatever way possible, right? Even if it's a Me Too kind of an idea, right? So that's kind of what then drove me down InhibRx, going down government grants and contracts, making sure that kind of money is available for startups as much as possible, right? So, and then when I got into the industry, I was like, wait, hold on, this industry is like archaic, right? It looks like it's like pre-tax filing, tax prep software, where the only way to do it was, get a CPA. Like that. Every other industry out there, you talk about legal with LegalZoom, you talk about bookkeeping with QuickBooks, TurboTax, all of these industries have gone through this revolution already, where it used to be a completely human effort. And then it came to the point where there was some tech company that figured out that you can automate, or most like 90% of the process is mundane paperwork, which you can put on affordable software and bring in the human as and when you crucially need that person. So it's the best combination of tech and human support that makes the best possible, high quality as well as affordable option for people to actually go through. And that's why, these industries have the revolutions already done. Grants and contracts have yet to see that, and we're the ones driving that revolution. So that's kind of how it all got to like where I am right now. It's a very interesting pathway to get there.
Yeah, you know what? And I think when you go through it, and I'm sure a lot of the people who are on the webinar here today are experiencing that. They're looking for capital. Maybe you're too early for an investment. That angel money, that seed money is not really there yet. You need to kind of get a little more traction, proof of concept. But it's like the chicken and the egg. Well, I need money to build my product, to go get traction and sell it. But I need to sell it to go get the money and raise funds to do it. And it really becomes this tough problem in figuring out how it works. So my background, I was a tech founder myself. I raised about $13 million, and I lived through this, trying to figure out, how I can take advantage of government grants, tax credits, non-dilutive funding in the form of debt, venture debt, revenue financing. And then of course, the last thing that you're going to go to, but what you ultimately do need to go to is your equity rounds and selling some equity in your company. But obviously, your equities, that's their valuable chips that you have. So looking at grants and the SBIR, I'm excited to hear more about it.
There's great strategies here to think about. And like, I would love to like, basically, if I had my way, I would spend an hour with every single entrepreneur out there, giving them really like the rundown of at what point do you need to consider what kind of funding option and what's the pros and cons of each of them.
Yeah, and it's one of the biggest challenge I think in the entrepreneurial space is like the critical funding years are those early years when you're really at ideation stage. I know myself, I didn't pay myself for a year. So I went pro bono for a year. And that was really the pain that I had to live through. And if you don't have savings, or if you're not in the right spot in your life where you can do that, it really limits your abilities to become an entrepreneur and really invest 100% of your time into it. And I'm sure this is where some of these grants come in.
There's a time and place for each of them. And even within grants, there's types of grants that make sense for certain stages of companies. Let me give you like a really brief rundown of what SBIRs are, right? So SBIR, the acronym stands for Small Business Innovation Research, right? And all those words are really, really important in this acronym, right? So the first one's small. Basically, they're targeting tiny companies. Now, in the SBAs, and this is basically a program that comes down from the SBA and is orchestrated through different agencies like the National Institutes of Health, Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, all of those. But the definition of small in the SBA's world is basically any company that's under 500 people.
That's pretty big.
Which is ridiculous, right? But there's another one here that's because it's small business. So the business is important because these grants and contracts, you're only eligible to apply if you're a for-profit business. Nobody else is even eligible to apply, right? So universities or whatever, everyone thinks of SBIRs, and everyone hears the word grant, and they're like, oh, all the grants goes to universities, we'll never win, But that's not this. Universities can't even apply to this one, right? Unless you're a for-profit company.
Right.
So small for-profit company, and then innovation research, right? So any small company that's doing innovation research, you can combine those words and basically say that these grants are basically for startups, right? And that's because the government doesn't have a formal definition of startups. They have that terminology doesn't exist in their lexicon, in their dictionary, right. The word startup, right? So small businesses working on innovative tech is their way of saying that this grant type or this contract type is only reserved for startups, basically, right? So it's great, right? Now, what kind of startups, right? So the innovation research part is really important. Any startup that's working on a product that requires some kind of R&D to be done, that's the kind of startup that's going to win in this game. And I say it's a game because I'll talk about that later, right? But it's really important to know that this is not for a company that's saying that I'm going to build. So the best example I can give you is us, right? We are not a typical SBIR awardee because we're building something that doesn't require a lot of R&D, right? We're building TurboTax for SBIRs, which means that we're following a known model that works, right? And the software that kind of already exists, and we're applying it to just an industry that has not seen the software before. By and large, something like this is not innovation research. Like we built our MVP in a month, right? I didn't have to do a bunch of R&D to build this thing, right?
Right. And like workflow automation isn't really innovation. You're just automating steps or process.
Right. And that's not, I mean, it is innovative. I mean, depending on who you ask, right?
Right.
So some people's definition of innovation is it's never been done before, so it's innovative, right? Some people's definition of innovative is like, okay, it should be not obvious to anyone, right? That's innovative. So this depends on the definition that you use. Now, even within governments, different agencies, they have their own definitions of innovation. For the NSF, for example, National Science Foundation, innovation is something that's basically anybody is thinking 20 years down the line and you make it happen in 1 year or whatever. For them, that's innovation. Like, basically nobody else can even fathom that it's even possible, right? And that's what you're saying, that again, I'm going to make it happen in 1 year. That's why my stuff is super innovative, right? But for someone like a DoD, which is much more classical, right? Much more by the book and like has much more, traditional sort of people on there. For them, innovative basically is, I'm basically right now writing my notes in a book. If I get a great auto note taking app, that's really innovative. Right?
Yes.
Not knowing that there's like 50 apps right now out there that can easily do the job.
Yeah,
But it's just that they
absolutely.
don't know. They don't know what they don't know, right? So it's just one of those things where it really depends on who you're talking to within the government for what innovation is. So I would say that by and large, if you're just building an app, or if you're basically doing something that's really simple to build and launch, that's not what you want to propose to the government to give you money for. For that, you basically approach these revenue-based, financing options, because then you'll be able to build and launch and start getting money really soon, right? And so
Right.
that's where you want to approach those kinds of venture debt kind of options, that those kinds of non-dilutive funding mechanisms, or sometimes contracts works for that, because if you can show that you can do something really well, then the government can give you contracts for just producing that sort of stuff and delivering it to the government. And some SBIR options from certain agencies like Department of Defense, they're actually awarded as contracts for you to basically be a service provider for the government, basically, right?
Gotcha.
So there's a fine line to draw there, um, but by and large, the way you want to think about when you want to apply for this sort of stuff is think about what's the coolest thing that you want to build on your stuff that sounds really moonshotish, that you would never do unless someone just gave you gifted money, right? Someone is like, suddenly tomorrow you won a lottery or something, and they're like, okay, now I have this amazing amount of money that I can do cool shit with which I don't have to explain to anybody. I don't have to like convince an investor for or whatever or anything like that. That's the kind of stuff that you want to propose, and you want to make sure that you are the right person to pull that off, or you get the right persons on your team to pull that off. That's what these SBIRs are really, really great to fund, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like, because you get the money a few months down the road. So it's not like if you have, and so that's one of the biggest myths that exist in this market, that because these are startup grants, if you're a good startup, you should get the money. That's like complete BS, right? So, if you actually look at the data, most of the startups that have done really, really well in industry are not the ones who've been funded through SBIRs, right?
Right.
They've been funded through other means. So like Airbnb did not go and get an SBIR. Uber did not go and get an SBIR, right? Any of these big
Right.
companies didn't get that.
Probably because of some of the problems you're solving for. It was too time consuming, too troublesome. What does it mean? How do you do it? And it's not worth their effort to go chase it. But if you can automate it, it's a different story.
Exactly.
I was also going to say, for those in the traction community, probably know about Boast, and we specialize in R&D tax credits, and there's a lot of similarities and a lot of overlap within the two. One of the main things you'd probably look at is the tax credit is really about going and spending the money and then getting it back. So, but the research side of it, and how we really define research, is solving technical challenges or technical uncertainties that are existing in the market. And this is where this gray line exists of like, what is a technical challenge and what isn't. And I usually kind of frame it in terms of like, if you're building software and you have to have multiple iterations to your code to solve your problem, you can typically frame it in a way where it qualifies for research. If you don't have iterations because you're just standing a website and you're building an app and you're plugging in some login credentials and password reset, these are all solved problems. You can Google the answer. That's no longer research. So you wouldn't qualify for it anymore. So I think the similarities are probably along the same lines in terms of like what the government and the considers actual research and what they consider kind of standard development practices.
Yeah, no, I think this, again, one of the biggest misconceptions that or not misconceptions, probably just ignorance from most engineers. They don't even realize that they're doing research.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh yeah, I'll build that. In their minds, they know that they're going to basically build a few things and fail and build something else and redo it.
Yeah.
In their minds, they know they're going to do that. But if you ask them to write it out, they'll write out one sentence: I'm going to build X.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're like, I don't know if that's research or not. And a lot of times we have to train these guys because they don't come from like PhDs or whatever background. They don't know what research is in general, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to train them to think like, look, what you're right now doing in your head, thinking through all the different pathways of what's going to work, what's not going to work, why would something work, why would something, all that stuff is actually research that you're going to do. Write it out. That's what we're asking you for, is either write it out or ask for help, or like switch on speech to text and just talk about it,
Yeah.
and that'll create the content, right?
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. So like what type of grants are we talking? Like
Yeah.
50,000, 500,000? What kind of size are we talking about?
Yeah, so basically it's the SBIR program runs in 3 phases, phase 1, 2, and 3, right? You go serially through them. Phase 1, depending on the agency, is anywhere between 50K for 3 months to 400K for a year. And
Okay.
depending on the agency, it can be anywhere between that. Um, phase 2, and then basically at the end of the phase 1, the goal of every agency is to get you to then convert to a phase 2, which is where now and phase 1 generally is for feasibility work, which is basically like, you have an idea, you've shown some kind of credibility that the idea has some merit to working. And then phase 1 is basically for you to figure out and demonstrate that this idea has some legs to it, right? It's got some pathway forward.
Yeah.
Even if it has to change in some way, that's okay. But you basically do the research to figure out what's the next pathway and whether it's viable or not to move forward.
Okay.
Once you've done that, phase 2 is actually when the real work starts, where you start building it, demonstrating that it's working, test it out, show that it works, all of that stuff in medium scale, right? And phase 2 can be anywhere from, I think it's like on the lower end, it's like 400K or something on the lower end, but it can go upwards of $1 million for anywhere between a year to 2 years. So because these, and that you can have all this done within the first 2 years, and because the amounts of money are similar to seed rounds in general, that's why this program is also dubbed America's Seed Fund. So it was really cool.
Okay.
Like most people don't know that, right? This program was actually designed and dubbed to be America's Seed Fund,
Cool.
which is completely non-dilutive. So you can get a completely non-dilutive seed round, right? If you follow this approach. And believe me that when you get that done, your valuation when you go to Series A with real investors is sky high, because you can demand, because you have the entire equity on yourself, or minimal equity that you've given away at that point.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
And it's non-repayable, like it's an actual grant. Is that correct?
It's completely free. No, it's not debt. They don't expect you to pay it back. They have no interest in getting equity in your company. It's the government,
Yeah.
So
no, they're
no debt,
incentivizing
no
research.
equity, completely free. And not just research, because they do want to make sure that the ultimate goal of this program is to create jobs. Basically, that's what it is. And this program has figured out that the best kind of companies that create the most kind of jobs are companies that have the best kind of product and the technology, right? Those kinds of jobs are the best ones for development. And what they're giving you is money to basically do that sort of moonshot work to create the best possible differentiated product that you can create.
Yeah.
That's what this really is all about.
I'm seeing a bunch of questions in the Q&A with a similar kind of thesis. So maybe we can tackle that right now. And they're all talking about, what does it look like from beginning an application process until the time you're actually awarded the money? If you could kind of walk through how long that takes and what that kind of looks like. Or maybe even, what did that look like before TurboSBIR came around?
Pre and post.
Pre and post. That'd be fantastic. I'd love to hear about that. Yeah.
Sure, no, absolutely. And let me just complete the phase 2. So phase 2 and then phase 3 is essentially where it can be any amount of money. It doesn't come from the SBIR pot from the government. It has to come from somewhere else in the government, and it has to have a matching component from the private sector. But by the time you get to a phase 3, believe me, you're talking about 25, 50 million, 100 million, those sort of kinds of numbers that you see at a phase 3. So it can be any amount of money that it takes for your product to be commercially, like nationally scaled and applied everywhere. So it's a great program. And then the government is incentivized to walk you through phase 2 and 3. So they will do everything in their power to get you to the next phase, right? And so success rates are also better and better the more deeper you go into these phases. Okay, so let's talk about the process. So depending on the agency, you're gonna basically spend anywhere between 10 to 200 hours on preparing an application, right? At least that's how it used to be. You would go to sbir.gov. That's the home of all SBIRs, right? That's where you would go first. You would kind of do some research to understand what the program is about, what the eligibility criteria are, all that stuff. You get some registration started. And then you would go and find the solicitation, which the agency is putting out, which is basically like a grant search, right? So you would do a search, and you can do that on SBIR.gov. You can do that on grants.gov. There's other places where you can do that to search for which is the best applicable fit for what you're working on, right? Once you find that, then that solicitation that the government gives out has all the information you need to start working through your proposal. Now, the problem is that this information, like I just mentioned 5 different places where you've got to go to even figure out how to get started. Once you get started, then again, there's another 10 different places that you have to go to actually get everything done, right? That solicitation can be upwards of like 70 pages sometimes. So you've got to read through, and it's basically a block of text. Right? You've got to read through that 70-page document or whatever to figure out what you need to do. And that's just knowing what needs to do, what needs to get done. And then you get into the how you're going to actually do it, right? And that's when you then come across like either you do it yourself, take a chance, or you get some help from peers who've done it before, or you go to a local university, they might have some resources, or you go to a local SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, they have some resources to help you out, or you can find a consultant out there, which was the way most people used to do it. And those consultants can get pretty expensive, right? And there's no limit to how many consultants are out there right now with SBIRs. And also you can go to Upwork and find yourself a grant writer, if you will, right? Right. That's also a possibility. So that's how people used to do it. Most people did it before.
You have one idea and you'd have to apply to potentially 5, 10, 20 different applications to make sure that grant matched your idea. Is that what you're saying? Or was it one application process?
No, it is one process, but to get that thing done, you've got to go to different places to get it done.
All right,
you've got to pull different resources to get it done. I'll talk a little bit about how you apply for multiple applications, because that's again one of the myths and misunderstandings that exist in the industry. We'll talk about that a bit later, maybe. But let me walk through the process first and make sure that everybody actually understands what it takes, right?
Sure.
So that's basically the grant. Like, you find the opportunity, you go through the opportunities, documentation, you figure out what's needed, then you figure out how you want to get it done, and then you get it done, and then hope for the best, right? After that. On our side, what we did was, we were like, this is way too much effort to even figure out what needs to get done first. And so we took all different databases of grant, opportunities or whatever, and then plugged that all into TurboSBIR.com, and we've made it free. So you can right now go in, no credit card needed. You can go in, sign up for an account, and start searching for opportunity matches with your technology straight up front. And then we can even guide people on through that. That we've made it completely free, and we've brought it all into one place, so you don't have to go to different places, right? And once you find the stuff, then it goes into like the what do you need to get done, right? So what we did for that was we took the most popular programs that most startups will fit, guaranteed, right? Yeah. And we built actual workflows that walks them through step by step of what needs to get done, without having to read through that 70-page document or whatever. We've basically simplified that government language into language that entrepreneurs actually understand and startups understand, because we're founders ourselves. So we have one foot in both places. And so we can do that sort of deconvolution of information, right?
Yeah. Well, and Bose feels that pain. I mean, it's same as us. We take the tax code for R&D tax credits, and we simplify it and fill out the tax forms and take care of that process for you. So the government has this way of making it really difficult for entrepreneurs to access the funds that are so critical for their success. But that's just the red tape that exists.
It's not built by entrepreneurs. That's the thing, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Systems were designed by officers within the government who've never run a company before, who've never been an entrepreneur themselves in their lives. So they're going to write the stuff the way they think about it. And they're like, wait, it's all there. It's all, I've explained it. What's the problem here?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They don't see the problem.
So then what happens after that? Yeah.
So then you basically go through so on our, at least what we've done is we've taken that and simplified it to like tabs that you work through with information of what needs to get done. And then comes the how part, right? So how do you do this? We don't like the fact that people have to pay like, bajillion thousands of dollars to get a consultant or whatever, because that defeats the whole purpose. You're like, if you had 10K in your bank to just give out for a chance to win the money, you wouldn't need to apply for that grant if you had that kind of money sitting around, in our opinion, right? Like at least I don't believe that most startups are so rich that they can afford to do that. And for that reason, this program so far was only limited to the rich startups who could afford that. So we're basically taking that and democratizing that entire thing. So what we've done is we've put a lot of tips and tricks and tools and samples of successful things on our app for helping entrepreneurs to benchmark what they're doing against things that have worked in the past. And so they can start to basically get an idea of, okay, here's where I am. So I'm here, I need to be here or whatever. And so they basically can start to like improve their stuff based on that. We also provide, basically it's all inbuilt into our really affordable monthly rate. We also, have reviews of people's stuff that they're preparing to tell them whether something's looking good or not, and what needs to get done to get it to the point where it starts to look good. So that's the how you get it done. And and this works great for people who have some kind of time to actually even put in to writing their stuff out. Now, there are a bunch of startups out there who either have no time at all to put in, right? Zero, or have like raised investor money before, but their investors will not allow them to go down this high risk moonshot route.
Yeah.
And they will not allow the investor dollars to be spent on that sort of stuff. So these startups are like, you know what, I need to get a grant to fund it. Otherwise this idea will die. And so then they come to us and they're like, we have the budget, we don't have the time. So just deal with it, or something along those lines, right? So what we did then is we were like, okay, we partnered with these grant writer consultants. Like this is where the human comes in, right? So we've partnered with these proposal writers and consultants where they have agreed, because our platform is so streamlined and scalable and all the content is in the right place, they don't waste a bunch of time with the startup, but for trying to get them to give them information and stuff. So what they did was they flat feed everything for all our clients at like less than half the rate that they would charge outside.
Right.
And we also have an option where startups can basically sign a success fee agreement where they only pay for the proposal writing to our writers only if and when they win the grant, win the money. It comes out of the grant, out of the money.
Yeah.
So it's like $0 upfront for that option, right? You still have to pay the software because the software is what makes this entire thing possible and scalable for the writers themselves. So that's how they're able to afford, like, the success fee option to give it out to our startups. But that's kind of so we basically designed it in such a way that finding the right opportunity, what needs to get done, and how it gets done, all of that is all streamlined in one app, and it's super affordable with all the options depending on whatever the kind of startup and whatever budget you have. All of you guys should be able to fit within our model. All of you guys. There's like no startup out there that I've not been able to help so far. Not a single one that has come to us. So that's kind of the entire process. Then, and we can talk about like multiple applications and stuff next, or anything else that you wanted to bring up, or we can answer some of the questions. I see a lot of Q&A going on.
Yeah, I think there's some questions around just in terms, say you're awarded the money. Is it awarded, say, in phase one in tranches, or do you have to prove certain milestones to receive the money? Can I take the money and do something else with it after I'm approved?
So there is a funny story there. In the 80s, there was a researcher out of the East Coast who was able to fake the data and get grants, and went and bought Ferrari for himself. And he got caught for sure, but he got pretty far into it, before the government found out, right? Anyhow, so it's just a funny story there. But yes, so there's two kinds of SBIRs that are given depending on the agency, right? One is a grant, the other one is a contract, right?
Gotcha.
A grant generally is basically given, the money gets given, is given to you straight up front for you to essentially do what they term as investigator initiated work. So you're telling them why you need the money for what and why is it important. And then if it fits within the agency's mission, to fund it, then they'll fund it. And they give you the money and then you go at it. And they hold only like 10% or 20% of it right till the end, till you deliver a report. but that's
Right.
like a minor portion of it. So you in principle, yes, you can take the money and do whatever, but then when it comes time for reporting and you don't report the right stuff, that's a felony.
Yeah.
So you can take the chance if you wanted to.
And if there's a clawback, or if they hold anything back, then you won't get it. I see another question here that's interesting, and it's just talking about success-based compensation for grant writers, and if that's illegal. And I don't know if you'd have an answer to that question. Yeah.
So let me walk you through the grant to the contract first. So the grant is basically given to you upfront. Contracts from places like the DoD or whatever in SBIRs, they are given more on a milestone basis. So like you basically have milestones that you have to hit, and they give you chunks of that money that they're awarded based on those milestones because it's a contract. They're basically essentially paying you to deliver work to them. Okay. So grants and contracts, two different ways of payments that you get, two different ways of the way you get the money and for what the scope of the work is essentially is for both of those. Okay, so let's go into that question that you asked. So there absolutely is, and then we have an FAQ on this on our site as well. So there's a common conception in the industry, which is actually absolutely true, by the way, for the situation that I'm describing. Consultants who basically charge success-based, stuff to people. They basically are, what they're doing is they're saying they're picking and choosing who to work with, depending on who's actually going to be successful or not. And then they put in more time to those who will be successful because that's how they make their money and they rely on that. And they put less time on other people who actually the other people might have paid them upfront, but that's a smaller amount. And so they don't pay as much time and attention to them. So that's unethical, right? So there's not this, the legality question is not, it's more about an ethics question here. So for those consultants, I mean, I was the first, not the first one, but I have been very vocal about how unethical that is right from the start, because you should be able to provide the same quality of service regardless of what the payment style is. So at least on our side, we don't pick and choose who we work with. We offer that success-based agreement to every single startup that comes to us, basically. Every single one. We don't say no to anybody. That's why we don't take the unethical approach of basically doing a better job because we don't get, so like we're not paid through your success fees. We are a tech company. Our software is what you're paying for. And we have partnerships with a lot of proposal writers who have agreed to do a great job for all our startups. So they don't know, essentially they don't care how the money gets to them because we're on the hook for paying them. So we basically put ourselves on the line for that, and we're so confident in our process that that we're able to do that. And so far, we've had no trouble with that at all. Okay.
Right.
So that's why we take the more ethical approach here and make sure that guys actually get their stuff done properly and with the high quality, regardless of what your budget is. The fact that you're applying for money means that you need money. There's no point in asking for a bunch of money. This makes zero sense, and I'm sure with earned tax credits in industries as well, this is very common, right? Like it's so common a conception that like I'm asking for money, which means I have no money. What are you asking me money for?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why you're exploring these options. So, and switching gears just slightly on that one, and it's a new question coming in. So say someone on our session here today is watching and they want to apply. What would that look like? Like, what is the success rate in terms of actually finding a match? Is it 50%? Is it 100%? And then how long does that kind of application process take? And then when would you find out that you got approved for phase one, if that were to happen? Would love to some of those numbers would be helpful.
Let me walk you through all of those things. The first thing was, what does it look like in terms of finding the opportunity, right? So I can guarantee you that every single startup out there, I can find you a fit for. Cool. There has been no startup that has come to us so far, and we've worked with hundreds now, right? That has come to us and we've been like, what, I have no fit for you anywhere. That's just, because there are 13 agencies across the government that have this program, and all agencies focus on different areas of science and tech. So unless you're building something for a different planet that operates on different laws of physics and science or whatever, which we don't have any access to. If you're in this world and you're working on something in this world and you're a for-profit company, we will find you a fit for where you need to apply, where you stand a real chance at actually winning. Cool. You might have to tweak what you're proposing to what you're currently working on, which is very normal. But in terms of overall theme, every single area of science and tech is funded. And there's 3 agencies where basically they say it outright, right? Air Force, they have what's called an open topic solicitation. What they say is like, look, we don't know what's the best thing out there. We don't know what we need. Why don't you come in, tell us why your stuff is so good for any of our Air Force, either people or Air Force bases or our equipment, our aircrafts, our weapons, whatever it is. Like, so I've seen Air Force fund the weirdest of things that you would never think fits within Air Force, like digital health and diabetes. And I was like, wait, you're not a health agency. What are you funding this stuff for? But turns out that a bunch of Air Force folks have a great problem with obesity, And so it's like the Air Force is like its own country. And so if you're building stuff for this industry, for this world, Air Force is its own world, you will find a fit within the Air Force as well for that same technology, right? To be applied to the Air Force. So Air Force is one of those which is really open about absolutely anything. Secondly, NSF, National Science Foundation, they have gone in and said, look, we will fund every single area of science and tech, except for things like therapeutics, because that should be developed by the NIH, the National Institute of Health, because they fund clinical trials and stuff like that. But except for, unless you're asking us for money to conduct like therapeutics development for clinical trials, anything else under the sun, we'll be able to find a fit for. So they also have what's called an open pitch. So that pitch, whatever you are working on, pitch it to them. It's a very simple pitch. See if they bite. And there's actually a logic and strategy nowadays to submit that pitch, because so many startups now are submitting random pitches to them that they have a second step now where they ask for more information to really make sure that the startup is actually really doing R&D and really developing something that's a real advance, as opposed to just an incremental kind of a thing. So NSF is the second one. And I mentioned NIH. So anything under the sun, anything under the realm of health, you can get funded from the National Institute of Health for, because even they have what's called an omnibus solicitation. So omnibus meaning they'll fund everything under the health umbrella. And there's just a whole wide range of topics. And again, anyone who's working in any area of health, I've never seen not being able to find a fit. So 3 agencies completely open in what they're looking for, right? And there's other agencies and components out there that have their own missions where you can adapt what you're working for to fit with them per se. So like, for example, if you're working on health, right? And you're applying for the NIH, you can take that same idea and say that I'm going to now apply this technology specifically to benefit the health of rural communities within the villages and remote places in the US, and the US Department of Agriculture would be really interested in that specific adaptation. So that's kind of how you tweak and change, or not change, but tweak and adapt what you're working on to fit with different agencies and what they're looking for. And believe me, that's exactly what you want to do. So let me here bust another myth that exists in the industry, that this is like people believe that, oh yeah, I'll apply for a grant and I'll sit and wait. It's a one and done deal, right? Believe me, it's not. It's door-to-door sales, basically. You're going to knock on every single government door out there to find which one will bite on your technology and your idea. And that's no different than applying or getting money from investors. If you've ever raised money from investors, you know that you don't pitch to one investor and sit around and wait for the decision. You pitch to hundreds to get 10 or so to listen to you. Out of that, maybe one is actually going to fund you. There's no different when it comes to grants and contracts. And we did a study on this. So we researched pretty much all the past SBIR awardees who won SBIRs in the past, and we asked them, right, like, how many did you apply for? In general, actually 98% of all the survey respondents said that they applied for more than 3. Over 50% of them have applied for more than 8 every single year across multiple agencies. And those are the ones who are actually winning, because every single time you get better, every single time you get reviews, if you don't win or whatever, and you just keep getting better and better, it becomes a habit. It's no different than fundraising with investors, where your pitch gets better and better every single time you pitch to a new investor. Okay. So that's another myth in the industry. Like, you don't apply for one and you sit around, you basically apply. And that's why we built the software in such a way that you can apply for unlimited number of grants on our software with the simple basic plan that you're on. We don't limit you. You apply for as many grants and you repurpose content over and over and over again for applying for different sorts of things. And that's kind of how you win this game. And it is a game at the end of the day. It is a numbers game. Yes, you have to get everything right and you have to look right. You have to be in the country, look like a countryman, but then you have to still apply for a bunch of stuff to actually have a chance at winning that stuff. And even if you win one, so there are companies out there that have been funded to 20, 25 of these grants and contracts, right? Completely. So there's no limit to how many you can win simultaneously, not for the same exact work, slightly different work, but once you win one, your chances of winning another and then another and then another just keep going up over and over. So it's such a great system to get into. It's a habit to get into. And once you have the first content built, it becomes really easy to repurpose it over and over.
Just be mindful of the time. There's one other topic that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. The small business technology transfers. Can you explain what those are and what the difference is between the SBIRs?
Yeah, so STTR is a sister program of the SBIR, and it's essentially reserved for companies that are collaborating with nonprofit research organizations like universities. So there, it is a requirement that you have to have a nonprofit research partner. So if there is a nonprofit on this call, the way you apply for SBIRs is find a for-profit to partner with and have them be a lead applicant and you become a sub-awardee on that. And there's rules of what percentage of the budget can go to you or not. And that's going to work through all that. And you can also find some of this information on SBIR.gov. But that's the only difference. Other than that, they're identical in terms of the kinds of content that you have to generate, the kind of work that you have to do. Everything is identical, the process and all of that. It's just that you have to have a nonprofit research partner and you have to give them a certain amount of money from the budget.
Fantastic. And then just that timing. So say you get matched and you get approved for a grant, first payment, like 3 months, 6 months, how long would it typically take?
So if you get a notice that you've been approved for an award or whatever, right?
Yep.
If it's a grant, the money comes to you straight up.
Straight
so
away.
If it's 250K or whatever, it'll come to you straight away. It goes into your bank account. If it's a contract, then you'll have to produce the milestones to start getting your money. For a phase one with Air Force, for example, the first milestone is only 2 weeks away after you get the money. So it's not that bad.
Fantastic.
But there is a timeline between when you apply and when you hear back from the review committee. And that, depending on the agency, it can be anywhere between 2 months to 6 months before you hear back.
Gotcha.
And that's why you don't sit around and wait. In that time, you start applying for multiple other ones.
Right. So for anybody on the session today who wants to get started, go to your website, sign up.
Oh yeah, it's very straightforward.
Get the ball rolling. Yeah.
Yeah, TurboSBIR.com. Here, TurboSBIR.com. Just go there. And actually, there's if you do decide, I mean, the free plan is free. You don't need a credit card even to sign up. You can sign up, start searching for stuff, get some feedback from us if you wanted to, get on a call with us if you wanted to.
And that's fantastic. And, I think about this holistically and, really, your cap table, your cap structure is a combination of government grants, R&D tax credits, non-dilutive venture debt or revenue financing and equity. And it's a combination of all those things. And that looks different for every company. It depends on how quickly you grow, what your technology is. There's a lot of different variables into what it needs to look like, but exploring all of these options is definitely something that every founder should be doing in order to increase the efficiency.
They all have their own place in the startup's life, right? They have their own place and they all have their pros and cons in a startup's life. And that's really important to understand, right? Building the best possible product, apply for these grants and contracts because they'll give you the money to do great R&D on your product, right?
Yeah.
If you have revenue-based financing is an amazing option because it gives you recurring money over and over. As long as you keep making money, it'll keep giving you money upfront for that revenue, right? Upfront. Tax credits are great. As soon as you start spending any amount of money on doing R&D, you want to start claiming that stuff back because it's your money. You've already paid the IRS, you claim it back.
Yeah.
Crowdfunding is great for companies that, if it's product crowdfunding, then if you have a product that's in the commercial, it's in the consumer space, great for crowdfunding, right? If people can identify with your product in the consumer space, that's so great, right? Equity crowdfunding is an even awesome option for tech companies that can have stuff that people identify with somewhat, right? And they want to have a massive database of people and users and investors or whatever. And then of course, everybody knows standard, equity is going after angels and VCs. But believe me, angels nowadays are behaving like VCs used to, who are looking for a lot of traction to suggest that your stuff is actually going to work out. The success rates are like less than whatever, 2% or so out there for angel VC money. By the way, I didn't talk about success rates. So SBIR, it's just nationwide success rates across all agencies for SBIR and STTRs is anywhere between 12 to 20%. Imagine that compared to the less than 2% with angel and VC, right? It's amazing. It's really amazing. And with with TurboSBIR, we've had double of that national average as a success rate with our clients. So because just we make it so straightforward for people,
right?
And we benchmark everything against stuff that has worked in the past, and we have really great support groups that can help people out. Our success rate's even better. But yeah, it's even if you don't get our help, the success rates just default are much better than what you would get anywhere with angels and VCs if you follow the right pathway to get there, right? You have to be playing the game again.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Yeah, I mean, all these options are really great for founders now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's the difficult part is it does become a full-time job to kind of look at this. But, thanks to you, thanks to Boast for creating streamlined approaches to capturing credits and the SBIRs, it makes it a lot easier on founders to access some of this non-dilutive capital early in their journey, which is super important. Increases the chances of success for sure.
Yeah, as a CEO, someone one of my best mentors trained me and said, look, as a CEO, your one job that you will never give up is raising money. You will always be raising money. So every week, no matter where you are, you will allocate time on thinking about how and where you're going to raise your next money from. So you will spend time on this. Just spend it wisely. That's my advice always.
Absolutely. Well, I know I didn't get to everybody's questions here today, but I'm sure you can go to the TurboSBIR.com website and pop some questions in there. And I'm sure you and your team will get back to everybody to make sure everybody's up to speed on that. It sounds like, the smart move to do is to go check it out and at least see what's out there and see what you could be available for. So thanks again for the session today. Super informative. Super helpful. This is what the Traction community is all about, is helping early stage entrepreneurs succeed and finding ways to help them hack the growth. Thanks again to Boast, Launch Academy, Growth Blazers, Founders Institute, Lazaridis Institute, and BCF Ventures. We'll see you again next time on the Traction webinar series. And Rupak, thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.